Salve miei amici! I hope you guys are doing alright. This is our second Innistrad video, and this is going to be talking about Crimson Vow. And these are the top 5 cards for the Vampire deck that you should pick up before Crimson Vow. My name is Cameronius, and we're going to get right into it. These are pretty budget. If you buy all of them, you only spend about $17.86, which is mostly comprised of 2 cards. And we will start with the most expensive one, but it's also one of the best ones for Vampire decks, and it's Captivating Vampire. It's a black and a black, and it says other vampire creatures you control get +1/+1. And you can tap 5 untapped vampires you control to gain control of target creature. It becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. Vampire decks are known for being aristocratic and having a lot of tokens and vampire creatures on the battlefield. So when you're having all those vampires out, it's not hard to get to 5. Plus, it's a buff. It is $7.81, so it's a little on the pricier side if you're more budget like I am. But it gets the job done. It buffs your vampires, and that's an instant speed thing. You know, they play their commander, bam, it's yours. They play a really scary creature, bam, it's yours. They try to kill your vampires. You tap them, you gain one of their creatures. And so that at the very least, as long as you have 5 untapped vampires, which don't need haste, by the way, because it's an ability, tap 5 untapped vampires you control. They don't have to have haste. The ability is tapping the creatures. They're not tapping themselves. So instant speed, they don't need haste, and you just get to take some stuff. So this is a great card to put in the deck, and that is going to go on to our next one. I tried to keep these guys semi-budget. So this guy is 44 cents. This is Stormkirk Captain. It's 1 a black and a red for a creature vampire soldier with first strike. And it says other vampire creatures you control get +1/+1 and have first strike. Nice. So having first strike, plus it's a vampire, so it triggers all the vampire goodness. It's 3 mana for a 2/2. It buffs all your vampires. All right, the next card we're going to talk about is Sanctumseeker. Sanctumseeker is 2 a black and a black for a vampire knight who's a 3/4. And it says whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And the important part here is it says whenever a vampire creature you control attacks. And as I've been saying, vampire decks make a lot of vampires. And so and this aristocratic thing helps too, right? Because you're already bleeding them with things like Blood Artist and things like that. So you then swing out with 5 vampires and you do 5 damage to each opponent and gain 5 life. You don't even have to be attacking. So let's say there's this dude, he's gotten down to 2 life, but he's really held himself up so you can't attack anymore. Swing 2 vampires at your other opponent. He just dies. It's just each opponent. You just can't do anything about it. And it's only $2.37. Like I've been saying, and they make a lot of tokens. It's not uncommon for this deck to swing out for 10 vampire tokens. And you don't even have to swing out with the Sanctumseeker. All these guys that buff and stuff, you don't have to swing with them. You're making plenty of tokens. Just swing out with the tokens. So you've got all these vampires. You've stolen the things you want. Your first strike guys are making sure they can't attack, and you're slowly bleeding them out. But they still have some creatures they refuse to give up. What are you going to do about those? Well, that's what Anawan the Ruin Sage is for. He's $2, but he's 3 and a black for a legendary creature of Vampire Shaman. And he's a 4/3. It's a very important text. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. So yeah, it's cool. You've killed everything else. You've stolen all the things you want. But man, they refuse to let go of their commander. Well, now they have to sacrifice it. And the chance it's a vampire is pretty low. But meanwhile, you have only vampires. So the fact that it says each player doesn't really matter. Even your captivating vampire who's stealing their creatures turns them into vampires. So you just don't care. It's just 5 mana for each opponent has to sacrifice a creature on your upkeep. The fact that they have to sacrifice a creature each time is going to be really nice. It's going to be really hard for some of those really commander focused or low creature count decks to keep up with you when you're making them sacrifice the few important creatures they have, especially the commander. Because you think about it, cards like this are never going to be useless because somebody's always going to have a commander. That's how a commander works. They're always going to have a commander. They're going to have at least one creature, unless they do the planeswalker ones, in which case they're a nerd. Nah, not really, but yeah. So it's almost always going to be super useful to you. Very rarely is it ever not going to be useful to you. And you're never really going to worry about it because all your creatures are vampires. Plus, it helps Sanctumseeker, it helps Stormkirk Captain, and it doesn't really help the Captivating Vampire. But these guys who are like wanting to get damage in and need to attack, now Anawan is making sure that all your opponents have one less blocker for you to worry about. So if you want to do that really aggro, I'm just going to turn sideways, then Anawan, the Rune Sage, is going to help clear up the way for you. And for only $2. Alright, the last one is our second most expensive card, and it is New Blood. It's actually a sorcery. I know we've done a lot of creatures. So it's 2, a black and a black for a sorcery. And it says as an additional cost to cast it, you have to tap and untap a vampire you control. Gain control of target creature, and then any things it says where it says a creature type on it, you change that to vampire. Tribal, very prevalent. Heck, we're talking about making tribal decks. And so now you've taken their best tribal synergy card and said, actually, it helps vampires now. Elves are really prevalent. I mean, angels are prevalent. Slivers, you imagine getting like a harmonic sliver and saying, actually, it says all vampires have? Yeah. There goes everyone else's artifacts and enchantments. Like, stinks to stink, doesn't it? It's $5, I mean, for that reason, because it takes any tribal card they have and says, actually, the creature is vampire. And so it's, oh my gosh, and even if it's not, right, even if you're like, oh, I'm gonna snag like your commander, which is kind of mean, but I mean, you do what you got to do. I feel like you should only snag the commander if they're gonna win. But anyways, or the one card that just came out in the core set, Risen Reef. Can't you bring Risen Reef and saying, well, now instead of caring about elementals, it cares about lands, or it cares about vampires? You're playing all these vampire tokens, and every time you do that, you get to find a land. Not find a land, but look, if it's a land, put it on the battlefield. Like, that's insane. So yeah, New Blood, $5 for a reason. Anawan, great card, lower the amount of blockers they have. Sanctumseeker is making sure your life total is never low, and theirs always is. Stormkirk making sure they don't have really profitable attacks or blocks. And Captivating Vampire to ensure that your guys are big and they lose anyone they really need. But yeah, vampires, pretty mean, pretty gnarly, and are kind of a pricey tribe. So I would pick these cards up before they start, showing all the cool vampires for the Crimson Vow set, because they are definitely going to go up in price. Vampires are very popular. But I think that's all I have. If there's any vampire cards that you were like, man, you should have said this one. I know there's all those really expensive ones, but maybe another like kind of fun vampire card. They're like, this guy also should go in any deck. Let me know. You agree and disagree with any of my choices? Let me know. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all this jazz, and well, I tell y'all.